There is a moment in human history that changed everything. A moment so dark, so consequential, so deeply written into the human story that its effects are still felt by billions of people alive today. It did not happen in a dungeon. It did not happen in a courtroom. It did not happen in a parliament or a palace or a battlefield. It happened around a fire, between two people who were almost identical. Same species, same brain, same DNA, same fears, same loves, same dreams. And in that moment, one of them decided that the other one was property, not a person, not an equal, not a human being deserving of freedom, but a tool, a resource, something to be owned. That decision was the invention of slavery, and what psychology now reveals about why that ancient human made that choice will make you deeply uncomfortable. Because the answer is not that they were monsters. The answer is that they were exactly like you. Stay with me, because understanding how slavery began may be the most important thing you ever learn about human nature. This is human theory. Here is a fact that will surprise you. For the vast majority of human existence, roughly 2 million years, there is almost no archaeological evidence of systematic human enslavement. Hunter-gatherer societies, the way humans lived for almost our entire existence, were remarkably equal. Not perfect, not without conflict, but fundamentally equal in a way that modern societies have never been able to replicate. Why? Because of one simple fact. You cannot enslave someone you cannot control. Hunter-gatherers were always moving, always spread across vast landscapes, always capable of walking away. If you tried to force a hunter-gatherer to work for you, they would simply leave, disappear into the forest, join another band, move on. The landscape itself was freedom. There were no walls to keep them in, no legal systems to bind them, no property records to define ownership. Freedom was not a concept hunter-gatherers had to fight for. It was simply the nature of their existence. So what changed? What created the conditions where one human could own another? The answer takes us back to the single most consequential decision in human history, the moment we stopped moving and started farming. Around 10,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. Humans stopped following their food and started growing it. The agricultural revolution. And with farming came something that had never existed before in the entire history of our species: surplus. For the first time, humans could produce more food than they needed to survive, store it, protect it, control it. And surplus created something else that had never existed before. The thing that makes slavery possible: power over others. Because here is the brutal logic that ancient humans discovered. If you control the food supply, you control the people who need that food. If you control the water, the land, the shelter, the resources that keep people alive, then you control the people themselves. The first slaves were not captured in war. They were created by debt, by desperation, by drought and famine that left people with nothing and someone else with everything. Ancient records from Mesopotamia, the earliest civilization we know of, show that the first enslaved people were often those who owed debts they could not repay. Ordinary people, farmers whose crops failed, families destroyed by disaster, who surrendered their freedom not to chains, but to hunger. But debt slavery was just the beginning, because humans discovered something even more efficient, something that would spread slavery across every civilization on Earth: war. Before agriculture, when ancient tribes fought each other, the outcome was brutal but simple. You killed your enemies, or they killed you. There was no reason to keep prisoners. You couldn't feed them, you couldn't control them. You were always moving. But farming changed the calculation completely. Now you had fields that needed workers, construction projects that needed labor, mines that needed bodies, and suddenly, keeping your defeated enemies alive made perfect economic sense. Don't kill them. Use them. Ancient Mesopotamian records from around 2400 BC contain the earliest written evidence of war captives being forced to work. In ancient Sumer, the word for slave was literally foreign land person. The first psychological justification for slavery was already in place. These people are not like us. They are from somewhere else. They are different. They are less. And the human brain, always searching for ways to divide the world into us and them, accepted this justification with devastating ease. Psychologists call this the Outgroup dehumanization effect, the deeply wired human tendency to see members of other groups as fundamentally less human than members of our own group. It is not evil. It is not unique to any culture. It is a feature of the human brain that every civilization in history has exploited to justify the unjustifiable. But here is what truly shocks researchers. The ancient humans who built the first slave systems knew exactly what they were doing. Ancient texts show that enslaved people resisted constantly, ran away constantly, fought back constantly. Their captors knew they were human, knew they had families, feelings, dignity, and enslaved them anyway. Not because they didn't understand, but because the economic benefit was too powerful to resist. This is perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire story. How did ancient humans psychologically justify owning other human beings? How did they look at someone who could speak, love, grieve, dream, someone with a beating heart and a thinking mind, and tell themselves that this person was property? The answer reveals something deeply uncomfortable about the human capacity for self-deception. Ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers in human history, wrote extensively about slavery. His conclusion was chilling. Some people, he argued, are slaves by nature, born to serve, born to obey, born without the capacity for full rational thought. He was wrong, catastrophically, historically wrong, but he believed it completely. And this reveals something crucial about the human mind. We are extraordinarily good at constructing intellectual justifications for things we want to be true. Ancient slave owners didn't think of themselves as monsters. They thought of themselves as rational people operating within a perfectly normal economic and social system. Psychologists call this motivated reasoning, the tendency to work backwards from a conclusion we want to reach and construct whatever logic is needed to support it. The ancient slave owner wanted cheap labor, so their brain constructed the reasoning that made cheap labor acceptable. These people are different. These people are lesser. These people are better off under my control. Modern psychology has documented the exact same process operating in human minds today. We are all capable of motivated reasoning. We are all capable of constructing elaborate justifications for things we want to be true. Ancient slavery was not an aberration of particularly evil humans. It was the motivated reasoning of ordinary human beings applied to extraordinary evil. And the most disturbing finding of all? The enslaved people themselves sometimes internalized these beliefs. Psychologists call it the psychology of oppression. When people are told they are lesser often enough and long enough, some begin to believe it. This was not weakness. This was the human brain doing what it always does under sustained psychological pressure, adapting to survive. Here is an uncomfortable truth that history books rarely state directly.
Almost every great ancient civilization was built on slavery. The pyramids of Egypt, built by enslaved workers. The Parthenon of Athens, the symbol of Western democracy, built in a society where 1/3 of the population were slaves. The Roman Empire, which gave us law, architecture, philosophy, and governance, functioned because of an estimated 2 to 3 million enslaved people at its peak. Ancient China, ancient India, the Maya, the Aztecs, ancient Persia, ancient Arabia, every major civilization, every period of extraordinary human achievement, built on the labor of people who had no choice. This is not ancient history's shame alone. It is humanity's shame. Because here is what the economics show. Slavery worked. In the cold, brutal mathematics of ancient economics, enslaved labor was extraordinarily efficient. It built monuments that lasted millennia. It generated wealth that funded art, philosophy, and science. It freed the wealthy few from physical labor so they could think, create, and govern. The terrible paradox of human civilization is that much of what we consider our greatest achievements were made possible by our greatest evil. But something was happening beneath the surface of every slave society in history, something the powerful could never fully suppress. Resistance.
Throughout the entire history of slavery, from its earliest origins in ancient Mesopotamia to its most recent abolitions in the 19th and 20th centuries, enslaved people never stopped fighting for their freedom. Never. Ancient Egyptian records describe workers striking and refusing to work. Ancient Roman records describe over 70 major slave rebellions. The most famous, led by Spartacus, saw over 70,000 enslaved people rise against the most powerful military force in the ancient world. They nearly won. Ancient Chinese records describe constant flight, sabotage, and revolt by ancient workers. And here is what psychology reveals about this resistance. It was not just survival instinct. It was something more fundamental, more ancient, more deeply human. The need for dignity. No matter how completely a system tried to strip people of their humanity, no matter how thoroughly it tried to convince them they were property, something inside them refused. Psychologists who study human resilience call this the inextinguishable self, the part of human consciousness that cannot be owned, cannot be broken, cannot be completely controlled. No chain was ever strong enough, no law was ever comprehensive enough, no system of oppression was ever total enough to extinguish the human need to be free. You might think this is ancient history, something safely buried in the past. It is not. The International Labor Organization estimates that today, in 2024, there are approximately 49.6 million people living in modern slavery. Forced labor, trafficking, debt bondage, forced marriage. The mechanisms have changed, the psychology has not. The same motivated reasoning that allowed ancient humans to justify owning other people is operating today in supply chains that produce the clothes you wear, the electronics you use, the food you eat. Most of us benefit from systems that exploit others without ever seeing the exploitation. Just like ancient slave owners who never visited the fields, never saw the faces, never heard the names. This is not comfortable. But understanding where slavery came from, understanding the psychology that made it possible, is the first step toward understanding how to recognize it when it operates today, in systems, in economies, in the quiet transactions of modern life that we never question because we have never been taught to ask. Around a fire, thousands of years ago, two human beings sat, same species, same brain,
same capacity for love and fear and grief and joy. And one of them made a decision that would echo through every civilization that followed. That decision was not a monster. It was made by a human being responding to incentives, constructing justifications, doing what human brains do when power is available and conscience is inconvenient. The lesson of ancient slavery is not that some humans are evil. The lesson is that all humans, under the right conditions, are capable of constructing the reasoning needed to do terrible things to other human beings. And the only protection against that is understanding how that reasoning works, seeing it clearly, naming it honestly, refusing to let it operate invisibly in the systems we participate in. The ancient human who first enslaved another was not from a different species. They were us. And the ancient human who first resisted slavery, who refused to accept that any human being could be property, they were also us. The question history keeps asking is which one we choose to be. This is human theory. If this changed how you think about human nature, share it with someone who needs to understand where we came from.